Welcome back, or welcome to my YouTube channel. If you are new here, I'm so happy you're here. If you are coming back, I'm super also happy that you're here. I'll have to think of a better intro at some point in my YouTube career, but I have much more important things to talk about. If you don't know me, I grew up evangelical. One of the things that I experienced as a very young person was reading a lot of Christian fiction novels. There was a Christian equivalent to anything you can possibly imagine because it was not necessarily encouraged to enjoy anything secular. Anything that was self-indulgent was frowned upon. So if you're reading fiction that doesn't have like a biblical theme, even if it isn't anti-Christian, it isn't explicitly Christian, a lot of us would try and get our like fictional fixes elsewhere. One of the book series I was the most obsessed with growing up was the Dawn Rachel series by
Lurleen McDaniel.
I read it when I was in like the 3rd grade. It's about this girl named Dawn, and she's 13, and she gets diagnosed with leukemia, and then she makes a friend in the hospital named Sandy, and they go to cancer camp together, and they're like best friends, and then Sandy dies, and then Dawn has to go to cancer camp the next year without her, and then she falls in love with her brother, and then she goes back home, and then she has a stroke, and then she has to learn how to walk again, and then she falls in love with like the football player who had been dating like the most popular girl in school, but then the most popular girl in school's brother got in a motorcycle accident and then he was brain dead. So then they like broke up. And the first time Dawn and Jake kissed, it was described as long, warm, and achingly sweet. Aww. It's a great series. That's not the one I'm talking about today. The book I want to talk about today was a must-read for a lot of the homeschoolers in my area. It's called The Courtship of Sarah MacLean by Mr. and Mrs. Stephen B. Castleberry. This book is about a girl named Sarah MacLean. She is 19 years old. She has 6 siblings. She is an old hag because she's 19 and she is not yet married. If you're 19 and you are not married, then like what worth do you have? It is a bit unclear whether or not Sarah and her family are just like fundamental Christians or if they are Amish. Even the positive reviews on Goodreads were like, I can't tell if this family is Amish or not. Nobody really knows for sure. This book follows Sarah as she navigates the complexities of young adulthood as a fundamental Christian who believes in courtship and is anti-dating and believes that dating is sinful and also is trying to race against the clock to get married before her biological clock runs out because she wants to have as many children as humanly possible. Chapter 1 opens, there's an entire chapter of exposition and then an entire chapter of a sermon. We open, after which we get a whole paragraph dedicated to every single member of her family. Rachel, her 5-year-old sister, Becky, her 3-year-old sister, Steve, her 8-year-old brother, Ben, her 10-and-a-half-year-old brother. She loves all of her siblings except for Janet. Janet can't do anything right. Everybody fucking hates Janet. Janet goes to other families' houses and helps them with chores and then comes back and says that she likes spending time at other people's houses, and that's apparently really bad. She also is not as good of a cook as Sarah, even though she's 14 and Sarah is 19. Everybody fucking hates Janet. And then there's
Jeff,
who is the oldest boy in the family and is 17 years old. Hello, Apollo. Then we have Mom and Dad. Mom is the quintessential fundamental Christian mother, and she's not perfect, but she's not perfect, but she's willing to admit her mistakes and ask forgiveness of whoever she had hurt. And then there was Dad, and we don't really know anything about Dad except that he takes his responsibility and discipline seriously. He takes
his responsibility and discipline seriously
and always follows up his episodes with hugs and smiles. So that's really awesome for him. After that whole chapter of exposition where we get all of the paragraphs about all of the characters, we have a
time jump
where they go to church. Sarah sits in church and she is contemplating all of her guilt and shame about how sometimes she daydreams during church. That is just such a sinful thing that she does that she can't admit to herself. She contemplates asking her mom if sometimes she struggles with daydreaming during church, but she's afraid that it'll make her seem
immature,
so she decides to keep it to herself. She was sure that it showed a lack of spiritual maturity, is what the book said. However, in this sermon, she was locked in. The topic for this Sunday was the dangers of dating and why courtship is God's plan for marriage. What is courtship? You guys, pop quiz. Courting is when the man will decide on the girl that he wants to have relations with. And then he will go and he'll ask his parents for their blessing. And then, once he has his parents' blessing, he will go to the girl's parents and ask for their blessing. And then once the parents give their blessing, they will call the girl in and then all say, hey, we had this conversation and we think that you are allowed to marry this man. The girl has the option of turning it down, but only after a time of prayer. You can't just say no. That would not be God's plan. In this sermon, the pastor is basically explaining that the Bible doesn't ever say anything about dating, but dating is for sinners because courting is for people who want to get married, and dating is for people that want to sample everything from the pot. The pastor says, in casual dating, the focus is usually on having fun and getting to seriously know lots of different members of the opposite sex. Marriage is often the farthest thing from the dating person's mind. This cavalier attitude can actually result in one ultimately taking marriage less seriously. If a young man, for example, can sample lots of different relationships before marriage, why not start sampling again after he's married and bored with his wife? Oh my God. And he continues on about how he dated before he got married to his wife, and his wife dated before she got married to him. He goes on to share that, like, even though they've been married for 35 years and he's super happy to be married to his wife who he loves,
She shared her thoughts and dreams with other men.
and that is like a form of impurity. Sharing anything with anybody before marriage. Okay, you have to like keep that shit locked
Tight.
Sarah really resonates with this message. She's like, oh yes, I want my parents' blessing. I want to be an obedient daughter. I want to be a godly woman. I don't want to end up like Martha, the girl at my church who never ended up getting married. She is an old hag. She's like 23. Sarah is super inspired after this sermon. She's like pumped up for the Lord.
In heat.
She's like submissive and breedable. She's ready to go out on the town. She's ready to get laid. Chapter 3, she and her brother Jeff decide to go to the store to get
Apples
to make
applesauce.
We like randomly switch perspectives halfway through the chapter to this guy named
Tim.
who was like watching her from across the market. He had noticed Sarah at the market many times before, and he'd been attracted to her, although he didn't really know anything about her. Even though Tim wouldn't admit it, he had an explosive temper and
Frequent bouts of anger.
red flag. George tells Tim that it looks like Sarah already has a boyfriend, so he shouldn't be going after her. And he points to her with her brother. And they're like baby talking to each other. Turns out like people think that Sarah and her brother are dating because they're really, really close. And we're supposed to think as readers that it's like a really good thing that Sarah and her brother are so close that people think that they're dating, because that is like what the typical sister-brother relationship should be. Sarah and Jeff eventually go over to the little bin to look at
Apples.
Tim is like standing next to the bin. This is like the entire conversation that we get as readers. Tim said,
I guess making applesauce is pretty hard work too.
after Sarah answered, he continued to talk to Sarah and seemed to have nothing else to do. After a few minutes, Sarah said to Jeff, well, I guess we better be going. That was apparently what made sparks fly, because Tim is smitten right off the bat. He's like, damn, I want to ask this girl out on a date right now. She's so different from the other girls. She wears
Long dresses.
He even says that the way she dresses,
Matches her personality.
not sure if that is a compliment. Jeff and Sarah go home. They make their
Applesauce.
A few weeks later, they go back to the store. Tim is there, and Tim is like, now is my chance. I'm gonna shoot my shot with this.
Hottie with a body, Sarah McLean.
So he goes up to her and invites her to a local hayride. She really kindly turns him down and says, like, I'm sorry, I can't do that. And he's like humiliated. Like, he's so fucking mad. But Sarah is like secretly really excited. She's like, oh my God, this guy, like, this guy kind of wants to fuck me. Like,
Oh my God.
Tim has like a massive temper tantrum, and then he kicks a box as hard as he can and makes a whole tower of crates fall down because he's so mad that Sarah turned him down for a date. So then we have a little bit of a time jump. We go to Thanksgiving, Sarah McLean's favorite holiday. The week before Thanksgiving, she and Mom seemed to spend hours reading pilgrim stories to the younger children. From the persecution to the separatists, through the Mayflower voyage to the Thanksgiving feast, everything had to be explained over and over again. Mom showed the little ones how to color paper bags to look like Indian costumes and cut fringe along the bottom edge of the bag. After cutting armholes and a hole for the head, she slid the bag up the front so that it was easy to get off and on little arms. What a charming tradition. Then Mom says she has an announcement. She is pregnant. She's 42, so that's kind of a big deal. Dad pulls all of the girls into a meeting, or like the oldest girls into a meeting, and he's like, okay, you guys are gonna have to be mom now.
And the girls are just like, okay.
Parentification is an ongoing theme in this book. Sarah's now gonna be mom. She's doing all of the mom stuff, and she is hyped as fuck. She's like, this is gonna put me in like Olympic training for courting people.
I am so fucking readable right now.
Like, I am at my peak. Then we have a time jump to January, and then we have another time jump to February. Why didn't I mention anything that happens in January? Because we have an entire chapter of a time jump that's just everybody in the house got sick. Everybody in the house got sick. And then we just move on into February. In February, Sarah gets a letter from her friend Hannah. She is letting her know that she is now going to be getting married. And Sarah is devastated. She's like, Hannah's getting married? If anyone was gonna be getting married first, it would be me.
Hannah?
She's so fucking pissed. She's so pissed. Sarah has a whole meltdown about it. And then Sarah's mom comes in and she's like, girl, we gotta pray about this because like you're being a little bit immature right now. Sarah, you might not ever get married and you're just gonna have to be okay with that. Sarah's mom suggests to her that maybe to make herself feel better, you can also pray for me as well as all the other Christians you know, that we will desire his will above our own. Maybe God would have you especially pray for the other young women going through the same struggles you are, even those you've never met. Oh, Mom, what a good idea, Sarah exclaimed. I think that will really help me. Even just remembering that there are other girls who are going through the same thing somehow makes me feel better. This seems like something that like isn't real, but I know so many people who were like this when I was a freshman in college. Sarah goes back to the market. She's finally there alone. Tim has been waiting for Sarah to be there by herself so that he can corner her. He asks her to a basketball game. Sarah is like,
I don't want to go to a basketball game with you.
and he's like, I'm
Such a nice guy.
why don't you want to go to a basketball game with me? And she's like, because we don't share the same values. And he's like, I just don't understand. Like, I thought you said like, not right now. And she's like, no, I meant no, not ever. And then he tells her that she needs to rethink the courtship nonsense because she might miss out on meeting someone nice like him. And she's like, I'm a religious person. And he's like, well, I'm not. So
Yeah.
then she says, I'm sorry, Tim. I've given my answer and my reasons. I'll pray that God will help you understand. Please forgive me if anything I've said has hurt you, but the answer is and must be no, both now and in the future. I'm not going to date. Now, I'm sorry, but I really have to get home with these things. She made her piece so clear. So clear. And then he responds,
Sarah, please say maybe instead of never.
Tim had followed her out of the store. He followed her out of the store. Sarah was frightened. Was he going to follow her home? Would he start popping up whenever she took a walk or played in the yard with her brothers and sisters? The only thing she knew to do was pray. Silently, she prayed that God would help Tim see that her answer was final and that God would protect her. Turning, she said, I'm sure I will never date Tim. Goodbye. He is off the roster. The next day is Sunday, so they go to church, and there's a new family at their church named the Locke family. The dad of the family is named John Locke, and he's unmarried because
His wife died.
he has a few kids of his own. One of them is named James, and he's around Sarah's age. They start like frequenting the McLean household and coming over for dinner and spending time with them, and the kids are hanging out, and everybody really likes each other.
James?
Starts coming over like all the time because he's friends with Jeff. And so they're hanging out and doing things together. James is working on the farm. Sarah's kind of making bedroom eyes at him because she does that at every single man who is her age.
She's like, oh my god, James.
James fucking hates kids. He's like super rude to all the kids. He never plays with them. He doesn't even like acknowledge any of their existences, and he hates all of his siblings. Then he asks Sarah's dad for permission to court her, and they tell Sarah, and Sarah's like over the moon. She's like ready to take the offer right away, even though she fucking
Hates James.
She was like, it's hard enough to find a man that shares my values. Like, I will
Take what I can get.
Her parents won't let her court him because he hates kids. So she's like devastated, but then she realizes that maybe it's like not a good idea for them to be together. Her 14-year-old sister Janet, who everybody hates, is like eavesdropping on this entire conversation, and then they find her and they fucking like yell at her and then tell her that she's prideful and needs to pray to God and repent because she has the urge to be included in stuff. There's another
Time jump.
We're about to meet the other family.
The Williams.
They're friends of the McLeans. They've been friends for years and years and years. They sent a letter saying that they're gonna come visit. They have 5 boys and 3 girls, and one of the boys is right about Sarah's age. Mom is about to pop. One night she goes into labor, and then Sarah's called in to help with the labor, and she literally has like the most flawless complicationless labor of all time. It takes 15 minutes. The end of August, the Williams. And the Williams are a really godly family. They have a lot of kids and they believe in courtship, which Sarah is super excited about. And all the kids are getting along and all the parents are friends. The oldest son, Luke, takes a liking to Sarah, except we don't actually see them interact. We just know that they're like in the same room and they're nice to each other, which should be enough for the reader to know that they're in love. And so he starts being a regular at their house. He comes over and he helps them with chores. He hangs out with the boys.
Things are developing.
Sarah does not comment at all through this entire ordeal that Luke might be somebody that she's romantically interested in. So we're like, oh, maybe she's not really interested in Luke. I don't know. One day, Jeff walks in on Luke sitting on his bed holding a piece of paper, and he really sneakily puts it away really fast, and he's like, that was suspicious. Luke goes home and visits. He asks his parents for permission to court
Sarah MacLean.
and they give him permission. He's like super excited about it, and he's like, oh my god,
I'm gonna court Sarah MacLean.
we know nothing about Sarah other than the fact that she's 19. She has been parentified since the age of 9. She has helped change diapers, potty train toddlers, cook meals, clean the house, work on the farm, take care of the animals,
Discipline children.
She has been a parent. And also, for the last several months, she has been even more parentified because her mom has been in a high-risk pregnancy situation. That's really all we know about her, other than that she really wants to get married and she really likes to cook. He comes back, he asks Sarah's parents for permission to marry her, and they say yes. All of them invite Sarah in because she's the last one to find out. The girl is always the last one to find out. Luke and Sarah finally start to get to know each other a little bit more. He comes over every weekend and has dinner with their family and helps with the chores and spends time with the kids. He asks Sarah what something about her is that she hasn't told him, and she like can't think of anything. And then he tells her that sometimes he takes pride in things. Sometimes when he works really hard at something, he wants people to notice it and pay attention to it. It's been really hard for him to let go of it. His biggest fault is that when he works really hard on something, he wants other people to pay attention to it, as if that's not something that every other person on this earth feels. And Sarah is like so humbled by this. She's like, oh my god, that must have taken so much strength to share that with me, because like you must have been afraid that I'm gonna abandon you after learning that kind of information. And then she shares with him that her flaw is that she can't admit her flaws, and she's a perfectionist and she wants everybody else to think that she's perfect. And then he leaves and she is convinced that sharing this with him has like made him hate her, and he's gonna break up with her because she's like so deeply flawed. So then she like falls into this like deep depressive state for 2 days because she hasn't talked to him and she thinks that he's abandoning her. And then he comes over to her house and she's like distraught, like, Luke, what's wrong? Like, I'm so sorry. I understand if that was like too much and you want to
Leave me.
And he's like, no, I don't want to leave you. I want to marry you. And then he proposes. They get engaged. So then we have a
Time jump.
from their engagement to their wedding day. Sarah wakes up on her wedding day, prays by her bed. The pastor and Luke's parents and her parents and Luke come into her room and pray with her in her room. And they have just like 2 basic vanilla cakes, homemade fruit salad, lemonade, and ice cream, and chicken salad sandwiches. Sarah's like kind of worried that it's too simple. Luke is like,
Everyone will enjoy the time in fellowship together, especially since no long hours have been put into elaborate preparation. Besides, no one could possibly accuse us of trying to show off or being wasteful. And a meal like this one won't puff you up with pride, he finished.
they were having a super small wedding. Sarah kneels by her bed for the second time. She prays and asks the Holy Spirit to make intercession for her with
Groanings.
which cannot be uttered. Sarah thanked God for his goodness and mercy to his unworthy servant. Rising to her feet, Sarah walked joyfully toward the steps into the new life which awaited her. This is the epilogue. It's 2 paragraphs. Rachel stood beside the rocking chair, her blue eyes full of delight and wonder. With her face upturned to Sarah's, Rachel asked, aren't babies special, Sarah? So sweet and tiny and new. They surely are, Rachel, Sarah replied softly. Now from God's hands to ours, she said as she bent her head to kiss the new little son in her arms. She got her fairy tale husband and the baby she had always dreamed of. That is the courtship of Sarah MacLean, you guys. She said, I could get on the court and play the game, but instead, I'm going to
Be the court.
It's such a fascinating book. I really hope you enjoyed indulging in that experience with me. Literally nobody asked for this. Let me know if I should talk about more like Christian fiction on here, because I have so many that I grew up reading that I have never heard anybody talk about. Check me out on all of my other social medias. I will put them over here. Subscribe to my channel if you want more nonsense like this. I will see you again next time. Thank you so much for watching.